Hi everyone, this is Kirsten Verklaas from NASEO. Welcome to the NASEO webinar on this NREL SolarAPP, the emerging US permitting solution. We will give this just another minute and then get started.
Hey, Kirsten, this is Brooke. I just wanted to let you know that I signed in with that link that you sent me.
Great, thank you, Brooke. We can hear you. Hi everyone, this is the NASEO webinar on the SolarAPP, the emerging US permitting solution. We'll just give this another minute and then get started. Hi everyone, my name is Kirsten Verklaas. I'm the Program Director for the Electricity Program at NASEO. Welcome to the NASEO Electricity Committee webinar on the NREL SolarAPP, the emerging US permitting solution. We're excited that you've joined us on this Tuesday afternoon. We'll hear first from Burke Tucker, the co-chair from the Electricity Committee, and then from Jeff Cook from NREL, and then Kim Burke from the Colorado State Energy Office. So with that, I wanted to let you all know a couple of administrative housekeeping rules. This webinar will be recorded. If you would like to ask a question, please either raise your hand in the box or type your question into the chat box. We will collect questions throughout the webinar and then have about 10-15 minutes at the end for a Q&A session. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Brooke.
Thank you, Kirsten. As Kirsten mentioned, my name is Brooke Tucker. I'm the Deputy Director in the Utah Governor's Office of Energy Development, and I also serve as one of the co-chairs for the NASEO Electricity Committee. And I wanted to call your attention to the new webpage that the committee recently just launched. It can be found at naseo.org/issues/electricity. And in case you're not familiar with the committee, it gives us an opportunity as state energy offices to collaborate and to identify some pressing electricity issues, and then explore some innovative programs and policy designs that can help support integration of renewable energy, interdependencies, as well as building a more resilient electricity system. And with that, I just want to, thank you all for joining us today. Thank our presenters in advance. And as I understand, there may be an opportunity for us to take a survey at the end. So I would just encourage everybody who's on the call to please stick around and do this survey if you can, as well as think about opportunities that you may be able to pilot and be engaged with the information that will be presented. So with that, I'll turn it over to our presenters.
Thanks, Brooke. Yeah, this is Jeff Cook speaking from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and I'm really excited to be on the webinar today with NASEO and all of the state energy offices that were able to participate, and I look forward to working with all of you going forward on the SolarAPP project. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Most of you probably do know about the National Renewable Energy Lab, but just for those that don't, we're one of 17 national laboratories, all housed within the U.S. Department of Energy, and we are the one that's expressly focused on renewable energy or clean energy, more broadly speaking. We have a variety of different research that we do at the lab, including partnerships with industry and academia. The SolarAPP is one such project. Just so everyone knows, of course, renewable energy is on our name, but we do a lot of work that centers around how we adopt or pursue the the innovations in the market today relating to renewable energy, also transportation efficiency, and how do we integrate and function or incorporate all of those technologies into the excuse me, into the market that we have today. So that's a little background on the lab, but today I am going to be focused on that renewable energy piece of what the lab does, and specifically around solar and residential solar. So why the SolarAPP? Why are we doing this project? So just as many of you likely are aware in some of your states, PV markets are rapidly expanding, and so the figures here demonstrate that it took a long time for the industry to get to 1 million PV installations, residential PV installs, and it's since doubled in about 3 years, and it's further going to continue to expand, as you can see by the estimated PV growth numbers in the lower bar there. So this can be beneficial for a lot of reasons. It provides a lot of it can achieve a lot of state and local policy goals around clean energy and economic development, but it does come with some issues, right? So though there are a lot more PV installations happening, and that can be good for a lot of reasons, it can also result in increased permitting and inspection requirements for local governments or authorities having jurisdiction. We also refer to those as AHJs throughout this webinar and the slides. Those permitting staff are still required to inspect all these systems and permit them without the expectation that there could be more resources to do that work. So a lot of jurisdictions across the country are becoming overwhelmed with the permitting applications they're receiving, and the SolarAPP, or the goal behind the SolarAPP, is to start automating some of this permitting processes so that you can ensure safe code compliance systems are permitted while at the same time reducing resource constraints on jurisdictions and allowing those jurisdictional personnel to focus on evaluating permit applications for the toughest cases and those situations where you can't automate these evaluations. And so that is the basis for why we're thinking about the SolarAPP project itself. And so to address these issues that we've just alluded to, NREL is pursuing a research agenda on 2 paths. One path is an analysis path, and the other is software. So the NREL is meeting the need here by developing what we're calling the Solar Automated Permit Processing Platform, also known as the SolarAPP Platform. And that platform is going to be the context or the conversation today, or the focus of the conversation, I should say. At the same time, though, NREL is doing analysis around permitting, inspection, and interconnection-related process requirements and activities as it relates to adoption cycle time, so how long it takes from a PV system being contracted to actually given permission to operate from the utility, and importantly, identifying how permitting, inspection, and interconnection-related processes can influence or correlate with delays in timelines, in that adoption timeline, or ultimately cancellations of systems because the timeline took, or the process took too long. And the overall goal of that analysis side is to increase transparency into these practices nationwide in sort of a mapping or in a mapping tool that'll be available online to identify across jurisdictions within the same state or across states that may be peer cities to identify how they compare on permitting and interconnection process timelines, to identify, to offer transparency into that piece of the market, as well as identifying what permitting or inspection related requirements and possibly interconnection, depending on the utility, that might be at play for why a particular jurisdiction or utility might have a slower process than another. And so that work is actually happening in parallel. And if anyone has questions about that, happy to talk about it in the Q&A section. But today, I really want to talk about the second piece of the puzzle, which is if all those jurisdictions have that information, some may be taking longer than others, and they may be interested in trying to find ways to streamline that process and align it with best practices in the market today. And that, and from that perspective, they might consider the SolarAPP. And so the SolarAPP project was funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, the Solar Energy Technologies Office, in combination or in addition to the Office of Technology Transitions at DOE. So DOE put up $695,000 for the project, and this is cost matched at 50-50 cost share, so a total of $1.4 million for the project overall, with the list of partners you see here that are providing in-kind contributions or cost share. And then there's a variety of other entities providing support to the project but aren't necessarily on that core list of in-kind contributors. And that includes folks like code officials and partner cities as well that are providing support in developing the permitting requirements, as well as testing the software or moving towards the testing phase. So that's the group of folks that are providing cost share, and does represent some of the core organizations in the group. So again, I wanted to circle back though on what will SolarAPP actually do, right? So there's a lot of options out there for online permitting, but what is SolarAPP really doing? So what we want to do with SolarAPP is provide an online platform for starting with residential PV rooftop systems, and it will provide automated code compliance checks related to those systems that qualify, importantly, at no cost to jurisdictions. So it gets right to the heart of the question before, that maybe jurisdictions know that they are overwhelmed by permitting applications, and they may also know that online permitting could help solve their problem, but they lack the resources to deploy such a system in their jurisdiction, or they're partially online for some other permitting processes, but solar just hasn't made it to the top of the list because they have other priorities they're trying to get to. And in either one of those situations, we want to provide a system or a platform that can meet jurisdictions where they are and get them this resource to help alleviate the burden that they're facing, or the immediate burden they're facing, all the while ensuring that the applications that are verified and approved through SolarAPP are indeed safe and code compliant. And then finally, I mentioned at the outset of this slide that we're focused on residential rooftop PV systems to start in the SolarAPP, but we are actively considering incorporating energy storage and other market segments into the application itself. So that's what we're envisioning the SolarAPP doing. Now we want to think about where we are in the SolarAPP process. So we kicked off the SolarAPP project in September of 2019, and so we're about 6 months into the project now. The initial part of the project was to develop what we called a preliminary set of permitting requirements, and I'm going to talk in more detail about how we developed that in a second. But we started with that, and then we've since moved into vetting those requirements with a diverse set of code officials, contractors, AHJs, and other stakeholders to confirm that the permitting requirements that we developed would result in a code compliance system. And so we've done all that, and in parallel, we were starting to develop the SolarAPP platform and software. So what we were doing, we started with some of the foundational things that you might think about, like registrations and logons and things like that. But more recently, we've now embedded the draft requirements that we've already built, and we've embedded those into the platform so that we can start testing and piloting the application. And that's the stage you can see highlighted in green here that we're moving into. And then once we've moved beyond the piloting stage, and I'll talk about where we are in those pieces later in this presentation, we'll move to the full launch and the transition period. So to confirm, NREL will not be the long-term program manager of this SolarAPP beyond our 2-year agreement in September that ends September 30th of 2021. Rather, we'll be transitioning it to a third-party entity that we plan or hope to announce at the end of the first year of our project. So that'd be September 30th, 2020. So I'll talk a bit more about that as we move through the presentation as well. So I wanted to circle back on the draft permitting requirements because it really is the heart of the application itself. So like I said, we started developing these permitting requirements with a set of organizations. Starting back in October of this year, we started to assemble the core team that was involved in the development of the preliminary requirements and then ultimately the vetting of those requirements. And so you can see the wide variety of organizations included here that participated in that project. And so you can see some of the code organizations at the top of the slide, folks like the International Association of Electrical Inspectors, NFPA, a variety of others. You can see a set of jurisdictions that have also participated in this project, both in vetting the requirements and some of which will also be helping us in the testing and piloting phase. And then there's a number of contractors and other stakeholders groups that were involved in the development of the requirements. In short, all of the requirements that you'll see in the demonstration that follows are based on the 2017 and 2018 model code years. So the 2017 National Electric Code is the basis for a lot of the electrical requirements, and then the 2018 IRC and IBC, International Building Code, for example, those are also leveraged for both the structural, electrical, and fire requirements, so all three. And I'll talk about those in more detail once we get to that section of the demonstration. But suffice it to say, this is the group of entities that initially helped us develop those requirements. And so we did launch those requirements for widespread review from the lab on March 24th of this year. And there was a month, a period more or less, where we were collecting feedback on those electrical, fire, and structural requirements. That, as you can see, that review period ended on April 21st. However, if folks on the call are interested in providing feedback on those documents, we'd be happy to send them out to you and get your feedback if you have expertise in these spaces. In addition, we are also, or in parallel, we are reviewing all of the feedback we've already received, and we hope to have that review completed by May 8th. And so then we can share the updated requirements with you based on all the feedback that we've received so far. So if you do want to hold off and just wait to see what we do with our partners by May 8th, we'd be happy to send you the documentation and the technical materials at that point once they've all been updated. But that's where we are right now. And so we are, of course, really excited and looking for feedback. So even if you think there are jurisdictions in your area that would be interested in providing that feedback, please don't feel, or please do share these requirements with them. And that brings me to the SolarAPP demonstration portion of the webinar. And I'm really excited about this because it really helps to demonstrate or bring all of those permitting requirements that we've been working on for 6 months, really brings them to life. And so I will start here a little bit on the registration and login piece, but won't spend too much time talking about the nuts and bolts of how the SolarAPP, like what the landing pages and things look like. Rather, when we get our testing phase kicked off in May, we can share this with you, and you can look at all of the different sites and pages and get a feel for it. But what I will say here is that there will be a registration process before a jurisdiction can be onboarded to use the SolarAPP, as well as contractors in order to verify authenticity. But in the context of jurisdictions, the onboarding process would also incorporate discussions around the parts of the SolarAPP that are customizable based on the local government's policies, fee structures, geographic location, and things of that nature. And so that would all be handled in the onboarding process. And ultimately, once that is done, you would be able to come to this login page and then ultimately log in. And so for the purposes of this demonstration, like I said, I'm not going to show all of the pages that would be available on the SolarAPP website. Rather, I'm just going to go through what a contractor would see because it demonstrates how the permitting requirements would be applied in the application. So ultimately, you would log in on this page, and then from the login page, the contractor would have a set of pages that they could select from, but ultimately we're going to move to where they would select that they want to build a new project or permit a new project. And then they would be introduced to this page, which we are calling the address page, or what you could also consider as the project information page, location page, or the like. And so in short, to kick off the project, what a contractor would have to input is reflected here, starting with a project title, and you would have project type, which at this point only is rooftop solar, but as we incorporate other things like energy storage into that, you could have rooftop solar plus storage or just storage, and that would change the permits that you would be required to fill out. But at this point, it's just rooftop solar, and you put in some additional information about the project, the location of the project, and then some of your license information, and importantly, the address. Now, the other thing I'd like to flag on this page is the SolarAPP eligibility requirements. It's that one hyperlink right there in the middle. You have to confirm that you've reviewed that. And the goal of that is to show that the application, the SolarAPP application is not currently designed to permit every possible PV system that could be permitted in a jurisdiction. Rather, if you recall from the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that we're trying to address the easier systems, the more typical systems, and allow the more challenging systems, or the more complicated ones, to be addressed on a case-by-case basis with permitting personnel. So what we're looking for here is those that are more cookie-cutter systems that could be more easily permitted by this automated process, assuming that they comply with the requirements. And so what the goal here is to stop the contractor from getting too far into the process without having checked that first, so they don't just waste their time. And then we will be regularly updating the eligibility requirements as we start to integrate things like the 2020 National Electrical Code and other model vintage codes as we continue to update the application. Because as many of you may know, a lot of communities have already adopted the 2020 NEC, and we're currently working on a SolarAPP version that would reflect those code requirements. So assuming you entered all of this information, you would hit next, and you can proceed to the next page of the permit form. Now, one of the benefits of this page is that you can't hit next without completing the page on any of them, and so it can help jurisdictions to get complete applications as opposed to just getting incomplete applications, which is quite common in the process today. So it ensures completeness of the project, or the permit, excuse me. So assuming that's all correct, you've moved to the next page, and that is the fire requirements. And so the fire requirements are, at least on this page, appear to be pretty basic, but the back end is very much complex, as all of them are in some respects. And so here, what we're doing is it's an attestation. So the contractor has to attest that they are going to follow all of the requirements set out in the SolarAPP fire requirements as listed in another PDF document. So I'm not going to run to that PDF document, but I did pull out some snips that you can see here and some description of what's in there. So the contractor has to confirm or comply with the disconnecting means, all of the labeling requirements, and all of the setbacks relating to roof access as reflected in some of these figures here. And so importantly, though oftentimes in an existing process, the plan checker would review these roof access pathways on the plan set, and that is helpful. Ultimately, they need to be verified at the time of inspection to confirm that the access pathways that are described in the plan actually are applied at the site. And so it's more important to verify that at the time of inspection, because that's actually what is installed, to confirm that the system is code compliant. So here we're saying, tell us that you will be code compliant, and then we will verify at time of inspection. And if you're not code compliant, you'd fail your inspection and have to adjust the system to comply. So at the end of the day, inspection is still very important to this SolarAPP process, as it is for permitting in general. So once you've attested on the fire page, then you move to the structural page, which at its heart is designed to ensure that the solar system installed will not negatively impact the structural integrity of the home, or in other words, that the weight of the system can be maintained by the home without negatively impacting it. And so here, there's a variety of questions that ask about the design of the roof, the weight of the PV panels, and their orientation to the roof to clarify or confirm whether or not it would impact the structural integrity. Importantly, there would also be, the contractor would also have to verify that the modules and the system, as it's installed, would be able to withstand the local wind speed requirements, and also account for the snow load requirements to confirm that if you incorporate the snow load plus the weight of the panels, that it doesn't again impact that structural integrity. And then there's also a set of questions to confirm or that evaluate the structural potential for structural deficiencies at the home, just to confirm that the roof is actually capable of maintaining or holding the SolarAPP sorry, not the SolarAPP, the system, the solar system for the life of the project. And again, here, if you answer some of these questions incorrectly for systems that wouldn't be compatible with the application, you would not be allowed to move forward from the structural page, just as if you didn't answer a question that was required. And by not being able to move forward from the structural page, you wouldn't be able to get a permit issued such that you would have to revise the design in order to accommodate or get approval. Or if you can't do that and get an approved SolarAPP permit, then you'd have to go to the traditional permitting process as you would other systems. So assuming you can move past the structural page, then you get to the electrical page. And this is a lot more detailed. As you can see, we'll have a couple of slides on the electrical side as compared to the previous ones, because there's a lot happening on the electrical side within a solar system or project, as you well know. So first, the first thing that's needed is to input the equipment that you're using. So this is the inverter and the inverter architecture in particular, as well as the module, the racking, and the shutdown method that you'll be using. And this requires also to upload data sheets and confirm that the modules or the equipment is all certified at the appropriate levels. And so, importantly here, we are working with the national testing laboratories to pull spec sheets into the application to help provide a compliance check to verify that the modules selected are actually certified as attested to by the operator or the contractor, excuse me. And we'll also be aligning with those organizations to be able to pull in, hopefully going forward, pull in the exact model and manufacturer information from that equipment, so that it can be incorporated into the application as well to avoid or streamline the input process. And so we are going to move to the next slide, but you would still be in the same electrical step of the process. After you do the equipment input, you then clarify some of the site conditions and installation details of the particular location. And your answers to these questions, including issues around the main breaker and the max and min temperatures, can all help clarify whether the equipment you're using is appropriate for the site, as well as the installation details. Then confirm whether it would be compatible with the 2017, in this context, the 2017 NEC code. And so those installation details relate to the conduit, the wiring, the point of interconnection method, and overcurrent protection devices. And so again, all of these questions are designed such that they can address and answer the questions related to a plan, or a permit review process that would include in traditional settings a single line diagram. In this context, there is no single line diagram that's required to be uploaded. Rather, the questions that are asked would address what would be on that single line diagram that you would be reviewing as a jurisdiction. So here it's just in question form as opposed to in a diagram form. Just a little bit different structure. So then once you've inputted all of the answers to this electrical page, you can hit the next step, or you can hit next and move to the next page of the process. Now, unlike the structural page, you would be not allowed to move forward if it's a non-compliant system. But in this case, as long as you answer all of the questions, for the most part, you can move forward, but some of them require calculations that I'll bring up in a second. So you can move forward to this page, the workers' comp page, beyond the electrical. And here you would have to confirm that you have all the license and certifications necessary to perform the work. And this may have some customization by jurisdiction. So workers' comp will be included, and then you move to the next page. And now here is where a lot of the magic happens. so on the electrical side. So based on all the electrical inputs, you would get to the summary page, and in this case, you can see it says, congratulations, your design has been approved by the SolarAPP. And that's because I wasn't mentioning, but all of the inputs that you saw in all of those screenshots result in a code compliant system. And so in that situation, we got an approval. However, if let's assume we answered one of those questions wrong on the electrical side, maybe the voltage was too high, or we had too many panels on one inverter architecture, or what have you, it would flag here and say, hey, you are not compliant with SolarAPP because of X, Y, and Z, and you can go back and fix it if you'd like, or otherwise you can't move forward. So if you do make those changes, and you again get to this page and get a congratulations notice, you would get 3 PDF documents that would be available for view here. One is, of course, locked, a permanent inspection job card. You need to pay for that before you would get it. But the other 2 you can look up, and that is the inspection checklist and the long form. And so let's talk about each one of those in detail. So the inspection checklist is a product that we're trying to provide to jurisdictions to support them in the inspection process by taking all of the information from the SolarAPP and giving them a clear, concise list of things that they should go and evaluate in the field to confirm code compliance. And so the hope is that it would be able to be used by all inspectors with a focus so that they can focus on workmanship and identifying exactly what they should be checking out in the field. And again, as I mentioned, this checklist, and along with the long form, which I will discuss in a second, is designed to really replace that plan set. And so instead of having that plan set to review out in the field, they'd have a checklist which has all of the answers that the contractor put in for them to check out in the field. And now the long form. So a lot happened on the back end, within the SolarAPP platform to say, yes, you were code compliant, or no, you weren't code compliant, and here's why. And so we've devised the long form, which elucidates the magic or really identifies what happened in the back end of the product, the SolarAPP itself. And so I just pulled a snip here that shows some of the calculations that are happening and some of the information that would be included within that long form that an inspector or other permitting personnel could review if they wanted to verify or confirm anything that they saw on the inspection checklist, or to verify or confirm anything they see on site when they complete their inspection. The idea is it'll show all the inputs again, all of the related approval calculations that again relate to how the system approved the project as it compares to the model code. And again, this serves as a reference guide that jurisdictions can use if they so choose. And then from there, I'm not showing it, but they would ultimately, the contractor, if they got an approval, they could go to the payment page, and the payment page will be customizable based upon the payment options of a jurisdiction. But suffice it to say, if you then pay, then after payment, you'll get to a new confirmation page that would include the permanent inspection job card and would allow the contractor then to go out and install the system and then ultimately file for or schedule an inspection after the fact. And so here's just a prototype of what that'll look like. Once an AHJ is onboarded, we would revise it based on their needs, but it'll follow some general format to what you see here. So that is all of the demo portion of this, but I did want to talk a little bit about next steps and how you guys can get involved before I pass it to Kim to talk through how she's helped us in the Colorado Energy Office has been working with us thus far. So as I mentioned, now that we have the software functioning and operating out in the field, we're starting to test it with jurisdictions. And so ultimately, this is a partnership between the SolarAPP team, solar contractors, and authorities having jurisdiction to ultimately test all facets of the application, because the key goal of this testing phase is to confirm that all of the systems that are approved by the SolarAPP are in fact code compliant, and that nothing went through the system that was not code compliant. And in addition, confirm on the flip side that SolarAPP didn't arbitrarily reject an application that otherwise was code compliant and was eligible to be approved via the software. And so in this testing phase, we're having our contractors start the process as it would make sense. They file some put designs into the system just to confirm it works. And then we're using jurisdictions as a follow-on evaluator to confirm that, yes, this is what the contractor, this is what the contractor inputted into SolarAPP approved it, and they shouldn't have approved it because of X, Y, or Z, or yes, SolarAPP should have approved it, we're good to go. And so jurisdictions and contractors will be integrally involved in the testing phase. And then we'll be shifting from testing to full piloting with jurisdictions. And I just want to check and see if I clarify. Oh, good, I do. So I'll stay on this slide for just a bit longer to clarify that testing is really kind of, it's pretty light in that we have those jurisdictions just going to a web page and testing it, that it's working. But when we move to the piloting phase, we're going to actually be integrating SolarAPP into the existing software platforms that the jurisdictions are already using. So it's more of a turnkey solution as opposed to something where you would go, a contractor would have to go to SolarAPP and a jurisdiction would have to go to SolarAPP. Rather, the contractor goes to the jurisdiction as they already would, and SolarAPP would be embedded there for them. And in this context, the SolarAPP would actually issue permits on behalf of the jurisdiction, as opposed to in the testing phase where it's just simply that testing of potential systems. And so we'll be actually using our testers and pursuing pilots with them. 2 of the 3 here have already confirmed to be pilot partners, and that includes Modesto and Oceanside, California. But we were very excited to work with Bakersfield as well in the testing and possibly piloting. So one of the calls I'll have for folks on the phone here is if you have thoughts about any jurisdictions in your state that might be interested in testing the software or piloting with us, please do contact us at solarapp@nrel.gov, or just you can contact me, Jeff Cook, at nrel.gov as well. We'd love to get them engaged in the process because we're still actively working on that. And now I wanted to talk just a little bit about, about the future of the application. So as I mentioned before, NREL is not going to be the long-term program manager for the long-term future of this application. And so we are developing a process, as you can see here, to select a long-term host. And we're planning to put out a sources sought notice here at the lab to identify potentially interested candidates. And then we'll be working through July and August to identify a short list and then announce a finalist by September, which aligns with the full launch of the project, of the SolarAPP. And at that time, we'll be working with that long-term program manager throughout the rest of that final year of the project to help set up the governance structure and organization of the SolarAPP in partnership with that entity, as opposed to just NREL leading it unilaterally. And so our SolarAPP team has developed a set of evaluative criteria, as listed here, that were designed to identify or to help us to vet that set of candidates that we receive. And so I'm not going to spend too much time going through this, but I'm happy to talk more through it in the Q&A as needed. But what I want to point to here is that we are looking for an organization that has credibility with jurisdictions, contractors, and code officials to be able to serve as this program manager in this role. And that entity or organization will have to be committed to an impartial governance board structure and a collaborative updating process similar to the process we used to develop the permitting requirements that are incorporated into the SolarAPP itself. And then finally, we are interested in their vision for the long-term growth of the platform beyond just what we have thought here at the lab. And so I'm going to end on this slide and then pass it over to Kim. But here, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we could use from support from state energy offices and other state agencies. So first and foremost, if you've done any sort of analysis data, or if you have any data or analysis related to permitting, interconnection, and inspection requirements in your state, please do reach out to me and see if we might be able to work together on how we might use that data to help improve the SolarAPP. Even if you don't have that kind of data, but you know permitting is an issue in your state, we'd love for you to help us conduct outreach to jurisdictions in your state on behalf of SolarAPP or to make those introductions. I know Kim's already done a lot of work helping us get a lot of feedback in the state of Colorado, and so we're looking to other partners in other states to serve that function. As I mentioned prior, we'd love to get feedback on these requirements and possibly have state energy offices or other state organizations consider endorsing or certifying the viability or use of the SolarAPP within your state. And so we'll actively be fleshing out what that means going forward, but it of course starts with your review and approval or consideration of the permitting requirements we've included. And then finally, you can always consider joining us as an in-kind contributor or providing cash into the project to help us think through how we can expand it going forward to include other technologies that may be important to achieve your energy goals as well. And so before I pass it to Kim, I did want to remind everyone that at the end of this webinar, there will also be a set of polling questions to help flesh out whether or to help us understand how you might be interested in participating or working with us going forward. So please do stick around for that poll at the end. With that, I'll go to this slide just so everyone can see my email address I referenced earlier. But I'm happy to pass it back to Burke and NASEO, and I look forward to hearing from Kim.
Great, thank you, Jeff, so much. Just a reminder to the audience, if you have a question, please raise your hand in the webinar box or type it into the chat box, and I will be looking for those. But for now, I will pass it over to Kim. So here you have the controls, Kim. Give me 1 second. Okay, you should be able to advance the slides.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks to NASEO for bringing me on this call. I wanted to start out with providing a little bit of a snapshot of Colorado's energy and climate goals. Colorado is very committed to advancing solar and building a clean energy economy. And my office, the Colorado Energy Office, plays a big role in that. Our mission is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and consumer energy costs by advancing clean energy, energy efficiency, and zero emission vehicles to benefit all Coloradans. And our governor, Jared Polis, campaigned on a pledge to get to 100% renewable energy by 2040. So he took office in January of 2019, just a little over a year ago. And our office, along with many other state agencies, have been working together across a variety of channels, legislative, regulatory, programmatic, to lay the groundwork to reach this renewable energy goal. So I wanted to call out a couple of accomplishments on the legislative front. During the 2019 legislative session, we passed 14 environmental or energy bills, and a couple of the noteworthy laws that were passed included a bill that set statutory goals to reduce the state's greenhouse gas pollution 26% below 2005 levels by 2025, 50% by 2030, and 90% by 2050. We also passed a bill that expanded the maximum size of community solar gardens. And so our office also works on a range of activities in the building policy and program space that intersects with permitting. First, it's important to point out that Colorado has no statewide building code. We are a home rule state where local control is championed. We did pass a law in 2019 that requires local jurisdictions to adopt one of the 3 most recent versions of the International Energy Conservation Code upon updating or adopting any other building code. But our role is primarily at the Energy Office to provide funding for training and technical assistance for jurisdictions to adopt and enforce the recent versions of the Energy Code. And so to accomplish that, we try to do a lot of outreach we have over 300 local jurisdictions in the state, to let them know about free training opportunities and support them in moving to newer energy codes. Our office is also undertaking a study on the market potential for building beneficial electrification statewide, and we're developing a roadmap on how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions economy-wide across the state. We offer funding for energy efficiency workforce development in underserved areas, and we're looking to expand that to electrification technologies going forward as well. We also created and launched a residential statewide energy efficiency and renewable energy loan program a few years ago called Renew. And we have a successful energy performance contracting program, and we support commercial PACE and utility on-bill financing programs as well. So I wanted to step back a bit and provide a little background and context into our office's previous research around permitting. In 2015, oh, it looks like my slides got a little messed up, but in 2015, our office funded a study to understand the size and characteristics of the customer-sited energy market in Colorado. We wanted to look at the trends, the extent to which these systems contribute to Colorado's energy supply. The report also sought to identify gaps in energy system data and potential solutions, and to identify best practices in renewable energy permitting. The study's vendor collected data on residential and commercial distributed energy resource installations through surveying permitting jurisdictions, electric utilities, county assessor offices, and they also collected a lot of data from federal sources. And while the study identified more than 29,000 solar PV systems that had been installed between 2007 and 2014, as is shown in the graph on the left, unfortunately, there were several issues and significant gaps with the permit data that made it impossible to report the actual installed capacity of those systems. The vendor found that permits often had missing, incomplete, or erroneous data on system capacity, project value, address fields, and the installation date. And the data did not always identify or distinguish between residential and commercial systems, or even various technologies such as solar thermal and ground source heat pumps. The study also found that there is a lack of standardization in solar permitting, which contributes to those data inconsistencies. And this is in part due to the fact that permitting is split between the state and local jurisdictions. So the image on the right is a map of Colorado. The blue shaded areas on the map represent the area that the state's Department of Regulatory Agencies oversees with regard to electrical permitting. And so the state has about 2/3 of the geography of the state, but a much smaller proportion of the population, because those blue shaded areas are much more rural than the green shaded areas. And the green shaded areas are jurisdictions that oversee their own permitting. So the study found that counties and municipalities use a variety of permits, including electrical permits, building permits, and some use dedicated solar permits or other specialized permits. And there was really not one standard that was being used. The study also found that the amount of guidance differed widely among jurisdictions, with some providing comprehensive guidelines and checklists and a list of requirements for solar permits, while others provided little to no guidance at all. And so I'd like to say that a lot has changed since then, but not that much has changed. Some jurisdictions have adopted online permitting now, but many still don't. A few of them, though, were forced to modernize their permitting processes most recently and move them online in the past month due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we were excited to be introduced to the existence of SolarAPP and Jeff at NREL a couple months ago. We've been working with him to help promote SolarAPP by connecting him with building officials from various jurisdictions who graciously lent their expertise and guidance in reviewing their draft permitting requirements that they're building into the app. And we're also encouraging jurisdictions to take advantage of the opportunity to test and pilot the app. We've also connected NREL with networks such as our Colorado Code Compliance Collaborative so that Jeff could do a presentation to educate members about the SolarAPP and what it's hoping to achieve. We think SolarAPP is a great opportunity to enable jurisdictions to streamline and standardize their permitting processes. As Jeff mentioned, many of them have very limited resources and staff. So enabling this technology can really give them an advantage. It can make it easier and faster for not only the solar installers and jurisdictions, but also customers to be able to get their solar projects completed and connected. And we're really also excited about the opportunity to improve data collection so that we have a better understanding of the number and size of customer-sited solar across the state. We know this has grown exponentially over the past few years, and we're very optimistic about the future as well. We know that just in the past couple of years, the Renew loan has financed nearly 4 megawatts of residential solar across our state. So I just want to end with encouraging other state energy offices to reach out to your own networks to make them aware of SolarAPP, because we think it can be an essential tool to assist local governments with solar permitting processes and to ultimately help them achieve their clean energy and sustainability goals. So I think that's all I have. If we want to move to questions.
Yes, thank you, Kim. I'm just looking if I see any questions. Again, if you have any questions, please raise your hand or type your questions.
Oh, sorry, Kristen. I did get a question in from, it emailed to me, which is great, from, I think that was David from the Maryland Energy Agency. So thanks, David, for your question. His question, or maybe more of a comment, was mentioning that, of course, as everybody knows, that all local governments, especially even in the context of Colorado, are very protective of their role and oversight duties of approving installations on people's homes, including solar. And so they might also be leery or worried about just allowing the SolarAPP to do this work for them. And so really the question was, are we going to allow jurisdictions to get a 3 to 6 month runway of time to feel confident that the system is doing, the SolarAPP is approving a project, and that the local government personnel, permitting personnel, feel confident in the approvals and that what SolarAPP is doing is correct. And so, yes, we're working with, there's two kind of routes to this. So when I was articulating it, for me, the testing phase is really where we're going to try and address that with our first core group of communities that we're going to move from test to pilot with. And use the test phase to build their confidence in the application. And for them and others, they've actually come to us and said, we just want help as soon as possible. So the faster we can get SolarAPP to start doing some of the permit processing for us, the better, again, for these typical, more traditional, more basic systems. So that can get that off of their plate. However, there's going to be a lot of other jurisdictions who are like, well, hang on, I want to actually test. I want to get a feel for how the SolarAPP works and make sure I'm confident that it's doing what it says it does. And for those, we are willing to work with them to say, okay, well, what kind of, what process would you like to see us do and to meet your needs? And so we are talking about that kind of parallel process where the SolarAPP, the contractor says, well, SolarAPP approved this project. What do you think, permitting staff? And permitting staff says, yep, that's an approvable project. And then there's some amount of time where that goes on, and then the permitting personnel can say, you know what, okay, we understand the SolarAPP is doing what it's supposed to do, and now we can just let SolarAPP do its thing. At the same time, during the piloting phase that I've articulated previously, we're going to be tracking exactly what the performance is of all of the systems that are permitted, and as well as all the time and resource savings, and identify whether or not this product or how this product delivers on some of those goals I articulated before about reducing time and resource needs while also ensuring systems are still safe and code compliant. So that would be my answer to his question. Are there any others that that might have encouraged or expressed from other people?
Yeah, so I have another question. Thank you for this effort. And the question is, to what degree can SolarAPP incorporate the utility interconnection process?
Yeah, good question. So there's only so much money in the world, right? And you have to do some things first. And so what we did here is we focused on permitting first, though we know inspection the inspection component and the interconnection component of the PII process are interrelated and all have varying requirements that could use this sort of automation. And so we are first on the inspection piece, we are working with other software providers to make sure that our application and their application could work together to provide a solution on the inspection side that could incentivize or could support virtual or remote inspections should jurisdictions want to adopt those. On the interconnection side, we are thinking about it, but we have not figured out exactly how we're going to incorporate or build out some support for on the interconnection side of the house. That is something our project partners are working on now, especially now around thinking about energy storage interconnection requirements. So the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, for example, one of our project partners is thinking through those questions. And so I should just say interconnection is on the radar of SolarAPP, and we will be working on that. We just don't have it in our, our immediate roadmap of next steps.
Thank you. I also wanted to ask a question. You mentioned, Jeff, that NREL is not the ultimate, project owner, that this will transition to another organization. And I was wondering kind of two questions on that. One is, who will then in effect own the data that is being, added to this permitting process and permitting app? And then you mentioned, you want to expand this to energy storage and some other items that might be helpful for local jurisdictions to do permitting on. And how would that work with, the transitioning to another organization? How much will NREL be involved in that?
All good questions. So I should have probably clarified, NREL is not going to disappear at the end of the 2-year project and wipe our hands of it or wash our hands of it. Rather, we just won't be like the website, web domain manager and the day-to-day revenue collector and manager for it as well. And I don't know if I mentioned, but it'll be run by a fee per permitted system by contractors. So there's some revenue stream that will be used to help operate and maintain it long term. But so NREL fully does expect to be involved in the governance structure that I'd articulated earlier that would be developed over the next year or so with that manager, as well as the updating process for any type of permit or requirement updates included in the application going forward. So we do fully expect to be involved in those pieces. And now to your question about the data piece, that is a good question. And as many of you know, permits and access to permits is in many cases public information, but it's not necessarily easy to find. And it's certainly not in a centralized location. And so the SolarAPP is going to allow some of that data to be shared, the aggregate data, not necessarily the address-driven data, but to allow that to be used for data and analysis at the lab or other partners to further provide benefits or updates to streamlining permitting, I guess, or other opportunities to do that. So the data in terms of all of jurisdictions, and of course participating, and the amount of systems that are running through the application, and importantly, where systems are getting hung up and getting flagged for non-compliance and things like that, are all going to be tracked and available for analysis in an aggregated way. We haven't confirmed how that will work as of yet, but we will work on that over the next year.
Great, thank you, Jeff.
This is Brooke Tucker. I know we're getting short on time, but can I ask one quick question?
Certainly.
Sure.
So a question that I have is if you've had any feedback on from any of your private partners on priority jurisdictions. I think it would be helpful to hear perhaps from some of the private partners where there seems to be a big appetite for rooftop solar, but where they run into maybe some permitting challenges or where it's not quite as efficient as it could be. Because I think as state energy offices, we would, just speaking for myself actually, would certainly be happy to make the connections, but as far as knowing which jurisdictions to target where it would really be beneficial, I'd be really interested to hear if the private partners have any recommendations.
Yeah, and we have talked about that in some detail. So first and foremost, if anyone on the call does want to work with us, we're happy to work with you. Even if you're not one of the states that we flagged as an initial priority, because we're still at this point trying to identify or nail down the priorities, and it's a fluid list. But to your point, Brooke, we have talked about it, and California is a key target state in the jurisdictions in that state because there's a favorable policy environment there. There's support for requiring a streamlining of permitting, as well as a lot of volume on solar to be clear. And so California is a state we're actively looking to pursue, but there's a variety of others too that we've been working with. So Colorado is another one that we have been using, or it's one of our top states with a variety of jurisdictions within Colorado that we're targeting, as well as looking into places like Florida, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, Arizona. Nevada's got quite a lot figured out there, but we've been talking with a lot of jurisdictions there. So those are some of the key states, and I know I'm forgetting some just off the top of my head that we've flagged. But again, if you didn't find yourself in that list, please do come talk to us if you want to get on the list. And if you did find yourself on the list, please do reach out to us because we actively want to work with you guys to, like we have with Colorado and the CEO office already.
Great. So we're out of time. Thank you all for attending. If we didn't get to your question, we will follow up with you. I just wanted to also point out that there's a handout, PDF files on the solar automated permitting process that you can take and download and further peruse. We will also email that out. And as Jeff mentioned before, there will be a survey at the end of the webinar, and it will be emailed to you as well, just to see if you have any interest and just to get a little bit more information from you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Jeff, myself, or Kim. And I wanted to thank Kim, Jeff, and Brooke for their presentation, and you all for attending. Thank you very much, and have a good day.